I'm Ariel Schwartz, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W. We are back with WNBA Stocks, where Owen Pence and I check the market in the W as of today, August 1st. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at Winsidr.com. That's Winsidr.com. If you're looking to get tickets for the current WNBA season or maybe the playoffs, thanks to our sponsor TickPick, you don't have to worry. The original no-fee ticketing site and official ticketing partner of the WNBA champion Chicago Sky. Use the link tickpick.com/Winsidr. That's tickpick.com/Winsidr for all your upcoming ticket purchases for WNBA, NFL, NBA, or any other event. We're back with WNBA Stocks, where we check the pulse on the market. Today is August 1st. Owen, it's been a week. We're back on our weekly grind. It's been a week since our last episode. The All-Star game has come and gone, as we talked about last episode. It's really the home stretch and possibly the most important WNBA stocks we've ever done. Before we hop into this, let me give the breakdown of 5 weeks to now. 5 weeks ago, we had New York and Seattle as our up team, Dallas and Atlanta as our down team. 4 weeks ago, we had Chicago and Minnesota up, and Phoenix and Las Vegas down. 3 weeks ago, New York and LA up, and Indy and Seattle down. And then 2 weeks ago, Minnesota and Atlanta down, Vegas and New York up. And last week, we had Minnesota and New York down, and Connecticut and Phoenix up. It's really been a roller coaster ride for many of those teams. I mean, we try, and throughout the season, we have tried throughout WNBA stocks to stay away from, giving stocks to the number 1 team or the number 12 team, because that's kind of just ridiculous. Also, I should say, since it's August 1st, my firstborn son, Augustus, will be joining us for this episode. So if you hear some chitter chatter in the background, he's just got some hot takes and he wants his own podcast. Owen, thoughts on when we kind of recap the past 5 weeks? Any surprises? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I love hearing the recaps because it feels like this season's such a blur, and especially the condensed schedule this year. It's just ludicrous to me that we're already in August and on the precipice of the playoffs here. But yeah, I think it goes to show just how fluid this exercise is, which was kind of the reason that I wanted to do it, when we started the season, is that you have these teams, other than the top teams. Chicago, for the most part, has just been up all year. Indiana, for the most part, has just been down all year, even though they were an up team early in the season. But, for the most part, it's like a lot of these teams have good nights, have bad nights, and the league is just so competitive that you really can, as cliche as it sounds, lose on any given night. If you don't bring your best basketball. So I think that's been fun, is seeing, New York was looking so good a few weeks ago. Then they were on the down, and frankly, you could argue they're on the up again. So it's just one of these things where it's like momentum is so elusive in this league, and to capture it and then hold on to it is really difficult.
Well, I would say consistency, right? Like, it's so cliche, it's so oversaid, but consistency wins championships. The teams that have been on our show the least have been, Chicago, heck, even Connecticut has been like probably the most of the top teams. And Vegas are the teams that have been there the least. And then obviously Indiana, because they've been pretty consistent, I have to say. Not in the best way, though. Yeah, no, I think it really boils down. Like, I was trying to conceptualize, wrap my head around where we are in the season, everything that's going on. And it was kind of just a situation of like, you have the consistent teams, and then you have the inconsistent teams. I almost said inconsistent. Like, it's that simple. We've seen sparks of greatness from Minnesota. We've seen sparks of greatness from New York. even Phoenix, honestly, even Seattle. I mean, there's been some up and downs. Dallas is a scary team, but enough of the back talk, right? Let's talk down or up first this week.
Let's go up. It's a sunny day here in Portland, Maine, my hometown. I'll be heading back to Brooklyn later. We got two Barclays games, two big ones for the playoff race with New York and LA coming up. That might be a little tease for later in the show. But let's start with up here. I'm going to start on a positive note. A team that we're talking about, right? This is a good segue because consistency is probably the last word you would use to describe my up team for this week, the Dallas Wings. They're a team that really, for a couple of years now, basically since they've started this rebuild, where they've just gathered all these assets and all this young talent. It's like, well, some nights the talent really wins out and they just look incredible. It's like, oh, this is a surefire playoff team. Other nights, it's like, what is going on with the Dallas Wings? Why do we not know who's going to play? Why do we not know whether they're going to play well? And why are they not winning and making, significant strides over the course of the whole season rather than, taking a step forward, then taking a step back? Well, Dallas, in this kind of crunch of the season right here, being one of the 6 teams in the race for the final 3 playoff spots, does seem to be playing more consistently than a lot of these other teams that they're in competition with. And that isn't to say that they've been perfect. They lost, at home to Washington since we last recorded. They also had a really, really important win in Atlanta on Saturday night. And I think those are the type of games that Dallas is kind of known to steal and known to be dangerous in. When they go into somebody's building and the other team is thinking we should win this game, very winnable game. Dallas doesn't always play well, and we're at home. We should take this one. In a weird way, that's when Dallas is at its most dangerous. They just have so many really good WNBA players on this team. And so I think, the two that kind of stood out to me on Saturday night in a really definitive and important win for the Wings in the playoff race were Kayla Thornton and Tierra Mccowan. Kayla Thornton is someone who has just had an incredible season and has really always been this kind of glue player, right? Where she can play, the 4.
The unsung hero.
She's totally the unsung hero. She we give, rightfully so, Alicia Gray deserves and receives a ton of credit for being this team's best two-way player. But Kayla Thornton is someone who for years now has been one of the best defenders in this league and one of the most versatile. I don't think we give her enough credit for being capable of guarding wings, no pun intended, and also being capable of guarding down low. She really can play bigger than she is in terms of her height, and is really good at guarding and making life very difficult for other power forwards. I think what we've seen this year from her is her offense has started to be a little more consistent. This team has so many scorers and so many potent offensive players that they don't need Kayla to score, 20 points a night like she did in Atlanta. But she is having those games occasionally where she's knocking down threes. She's making things happen offensively when her number's being called upon. And that's just been huge for this team. And then as far as Mccowan goes, this is kind of a great story because she's someone who's had such an interesting up and down WNBA career. It's so clear that the talent is there. It's so clear that she can do what she did in Atlanta every night, which is put up 14 points, 14 rebounds. She's someone who in Indiana struggled to know what her role was. Sometimes she'd start, sometimes she'd come off the bench. And it almost became like the popular thing to do to say, well, is Tierra Mccowan have a future in this league? She's not, laterally very quick defensively. She's got holes in her game. What can she do? Ultimately, she can be a really good defender, in the paint in terms of playing to her strengths. She's an elite rebounder, and she can give you 15 to 20 points. And that's exactly what Dallas needs in the front court right now. So she's kind of emerging at a perfect time for this team. And look, they've put themselves back in position to make the playoffs now, where when we recorded last week and, around the All-Star break, it was looking questionable whether Dallas was going to be one of those 3 teams to sneak into the playoffs. Now, if you ask me today, I'd feel fairly confident that Dallas is going to make it, which once again, no guarantees. And this team is
Are you confident based on how they're playing, or are you confident based on who they have to play / where they're standing right now in the standings?
It's a great question. It's a combination of the two. I'd say mostly how they're playing. I think that over the course of the year, Vicky Johnson has started to get a better grasp on what this team's strengths are and how to make those shine through. But I would also say it's a function of the fact that it just seems like the other teams that are competing for the playoff spots. I'm never going to say they don't want them. Everyone wants them desperately. It's so easy to sit on a couch and criticize. But if I'm looking at, I'm not going to spoil who our two down teams are this week, but our two down teams are teams that are in amazing positions to make the playoffs right now and are kind of looking pretty shy. They're looking like, we're not quite ready for it yet for one reason or another. And that makes me think that Dallas is kind of just coming out and taking it because they've already been there. They made it last year. They have the star and Enrique. They have all these amazing complementary players. When it's working, it's really working. And I think we're seeing that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I would think the way you put it early on, I think to me was the best part. When you said that it's kind of like how I'm not even going to try and paraphrase. You were talking about how like when other teams go up, you can kind of shortchange the Dallas Wings, and that's when when you take the Dallas Wings seriously and you consider them a top dog. I think that's when we see them kind of falter a little bit, and teams find ways to beat them. When teams, start off a little lackadaisically, start off a little easy, maybe go into it with a little bit of an idea of, oh, it's the Dallas Wings, they're not consistent. If they have an on night, okay, but most likely, what I mean, like when you doubt your opponent, you're setting yourself up for a very rude awakening, as it were. They have the talent, we know this. The question, in complete honesty, there's three questions: GM / owner Greg Bibb, head coach Vicky Johnson, and then the roster. But I think the roster kind of almost ties back, excuse me, to GM Greg Bibb, where it's a situation of like, is this a team that can grow together as a unit? Because everybody is basically in that, for the most part, in that same stage of their career, trying to get to their prime. Or do they need to kind of cut ties with some of these prospects to try and get a player who has that vet ability, that vet experience, and then make a deep playoff run in a championship? I don't know. I completely agree. Dallas is an up team this week. My up team this week might come to the shock to my wife, some people who've been following Winsidr for a while. The Washington Mystics has been lack of consistency, but I wouldn't even say that it's a lack of consistency from the players in regards to their play, but more so, do we have Deladon? Do we not have Deladon? It really comes down to that, and Gus agrees with me, so that's pretty cool. He never agrees with me. And the Washington Mystics have shown points during this season that their defense is a lockdown, intimidating defense. The question for me, for the most part, has kind of been, what's going to happen when this team loses its vision, loses its path? Who's going to be the one to kind of step up and take the reins and really refocus the team? And in mid game, who's going to refocus this Washington Mystics team and push them forward? Right now, clinched a playoff spot with a loss and then pulled off the victory against Seattle. I think they're 2-1 in the past week. And honestly, this team is a team that is poised right now. Deladon played her first back-to-back, and we see them ramping up and looking ready for the playoffs. What's your thoughts on the Mystics?
Yeah, I love where the Mystics are at right now. I think that the fact that they split this little back-to-back with Seattle was perfect because more than anything, this is an analysis. This is just the fan in me. I want Washington and Seattle in that 4-5 series. Like that is just, we saw it this weekend. They played 2 games back to back. They were both really competitive, both really compelling. 2 teams that are extremely stout defensively and that have transcendent all-time offensive players. The question being, can those offensive players win out against like really elite defenses? I think Washington's in a really good spot. I mean, they have the best defense in the league per defensive rating. Seattle is second, so that's really where they make their strides and kind of gain leads here and create separation. But it's just a really fun team when everyone's healthy. And knock on wood, right now we are seeing this team, at its fullest. I think that EDD, when she's played this year, has been, on an MVP pace. I would not say, even if you extrapolated her per game averages out over the course of a full season, I think I'd still lean Asia as the MVP. I'd still lean Stewie, and I kind of have EDD in that 3-4 range with maybe Jonquel. But ultimately, this is a team that doesn't need Deladon to be the best player in the league. They just need her to be at that level that she has been at basically her whole career, which is a top 5 player and really just the best shooter in the league, the most dangerous shooter. That's what we saw in those games against Seattle, even against really good defense. The other player I want to mention is Ariel Atkins. I think that Natasha Cloud sent out that tweet about her defense, and frankly, I agree. I think that Natasha does not get enough credit for her defense, and we sometimes tend to overlook defense at the point guard position. It's easier to complement wings and bigs when it comes to defensive dominance. What Natasha Cloud's doing on both ends, but specifically defense, is nothing short of incredible. But Ariel Atkins is kind of like, to me, the real key piece on this team in terms of how far they're gonna go in the playoffs, and if they can beat Seattle in that potential first round series. She's someone who played really well offensively yesterday in the win, and really is just so consistent, so solid, always makes the right play, is lethal from three, can create her own offense, but does not need the ball in her hands all the time, which is a really delicate balance and not something you see very often. And then, we're talking about Natasha Cloud's defense. Ariel Atkins has a case, to be the best defensive wing in the league. Certainly one of them. The way she plays on the perimeter really lifts this team to heights that, could make them extremely dangerous in the playoffs. And they're just deep. This is a roster that's been put together really well. Coach T has won a championship. He knows how to get the best out of his players. You got Shakira Austin, who I just love her game and is looking so comfortable as a rookie, and is just going to get even better once she starts to really consistently knock down shots and get a little more touch. But I mean, defensively on the boards, she really is just disrupting a whole lot of things that in a way that you don't see rookies do very often. So I'm really bullish on this team's future, in terms of entering the playoffs here. I think they're in a great spot.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a pretty impressive team. It's one of those teams that it's hard to, I don't know. A lot of the teams this season are really hard for me to pick individual awards because it's been such a team effort. But we can get into that later. For those that don't know, we at Winsidr have been hosting some WNBA watch parties using a cool new platform called Playback. We're all able to watch together, so there's no spoilers. We have it all on the exact same time. We've been doing some fun giveaways of vintage WNBA jerseys, posters, WNBA Top Shots. It's free to sign up, and it literally takes 2 minutes. My 9-month-old baby, Augustus, could sign up. It's that simple. We'll be doing one tomorrow, actually, for the Washington Mystics Las Vegas Aces game. And yeah, might be a playoff preview. Would love to see a Storm Mystics playoff series. We've seen that before, and we know how good that is. That's right, Gus. Let's talk about our down teams. For me, it's pretty simple. You look at the standings, and this is how I approached it. I look at the standings, I look at past 10 games, I look at the games over the last week, who went from being in a semi-comfortable or a more comfortable position making the playoffs, and who is kind of faltering their chances of making the playoffs. And there's a few teams that come to mind in that, and that's the LA Sparks. The LA Sparks, I don't know how, right? In my mind, when I think back, maybe I'd have to look at the exact stats. They didn't exactly have a rousing run after Derek Fisher left the organization. It did not seem like this team rallied behind it, and it does not seem like this team has rallied behind. Now, I definitely see the effort since Liz Cambage has left, but it does not seem like this team has really, said, oh, we're going to prove that Liz was the reason that we were losing and so on and so forth. And for me, that's kind of the big sign. And so for me with the LA Sparks, it's just a situation of, look, they're 4-6 in the last 10 games. They're slowly slipping out of the playoff race. We've seen this team have late time pushes in games, and we know the effort's there. They're not just like giving up on the game or anything, but at the same remark, like this team is slipping out, and we're slowly and slowly seeing when, star and star goes missing, what's going to happen to this team. You can't realistically think that this team, is going to make the most ridiculous push. NECA is playing MVP style basketball, but there's limitations to how much she can carry a team. The LA Sparks have a talented team, but with injuries and Liz Cambage leaving, it honestly just seems like they're doomed to miss the playoffs for a second consecutive year. What's your thoughts on LA?
I just want to say first off that it couldn't be more on brand and fitting that Gus here, named after one of the Minnesota legends. Just the minute we start talking about the Los Angeles Sparks, it's just like he's not having it. He's not a fan of this team, and it's clear. And you know what? I just love it. He's already a beautiful Lynx fan.
He does not hold back his opinions or takes, which I got to
He
respect.
doesn't, and you know what? We love that. Here's my thing with Los Angeles. I agree with everything you said. I was maybe expecting this team after Liz left to have a little one of those bumps, just like, okay, I don't know what happened, so I don't want to speculate. But she was a player who seemed to be unhappy with her role, where the numbers would point to the fact that she had the second highest usage percentage on the team and the highest usage percentage amongst the starters. So you could definitely conceive of a reality in which, okay, Liz leaves the team and everyone's like, okay, now we're kind of starting to flow, whatever. It hasn't happened, and you know what? Maybe that's because Liz is an amazing basketball player and she really helps you. Maybe it's because this team is just tired. They've had to deal with so much in terms of like the noise and the non-basketball stuff this year that they might just be spent. Regardless, it's been, difficult and frankly a little surprising watching these last couple games here, because this is the time to make the push, and really it looks like they're doing the opposite of that. Now, shout out to NECA, who is just unbelievably good and just brings it every night, and like you said, is playing MVP ball. But this team does not have the players stepping up in the way that teams in this range need to if they want to make the playoffs, in terms of those complementary pieces. Okay, you look at Phoenix right now, a team that's making a playoff push. They've got Skylar Diggins-Smith playing first team all WNBA level, but Diana's still bringing it, a good portion of the nights offensively. Shea Petty's having an amazing season. Sophie Cunningham has entered into the starting lineup and has provided a really big boost. Turner is one of the best defenders in the league and a real unsung hero. You're just not seeing that as much with the role players on Los Angeles. And I think the key point here is that, in past seasons, for all that we criticize Derek Fisher about as far as his tenure as head coach, one thing he really knew how to do very well was construct a top defense. Even in those years where they weren't, super good. I'm really thinking of last year specifically, the post Candace Parker, Chelsea Gray era. They still had a top 3 or 4 defense, and that allowed them to be competitive. Even if they didn't make the playoffs, they were still competitive because they could rely on that defense making things difficult for opponents. This year, they have the second worst defense in the league. The only one that's worse, no surprise, is Indiana. So if you're the 11th defense and then they're the 9th offense per offensive rating, it's not a recipe for winning, and we're seeing it in terms of their net rating. They are statistically the second worst team in the league, with Indiana far and away, in the cellar. And I don't think anyone really expected that, because this team does have a lot of players that are good role complementary players in the right setting. Jordan Canada, Katie Lou Samuelson's having a great year. Lexi Brown's having a great year. Kennedy Carter in the right setting can be extremely dynamic. Brittany Sykes, defensive player.
But Owen, I would say that you're completely right. The issue is that they're all being at, like, the Phoenix comparison. I think is a great example, because you have one player, Skylar Diggins, who's just playing out of her mind, and everybody else falling into the roles appropriately and playing to their strengths. As where we have in LA, We just have people, role players who can be skilled in certain ways, not doing
Exactly. And I think that the one thing that people pointed to at the start of the season, questioning this team, was are they going to have enough shooting? And I think ultimately that is the downfall. You saw it at the very end when they had that great comeback last night and then fell short against Minnesota, on that final possession where they could have, really gotten back into the game. And NECA misses the three, and then they get the offensive rebound and are just kind of passing it around. And no team is really that scared of these players shooting the ball other than Lexi or Katie Lou. It's just not enough shooting. So I think to your point, it's like these players in the right role. Jordan Canada is an amazing, player. She's not going to be a star, but she's going to be just so solid. But they don't have the right environment to thrive because the roster just was not constructed well enough. And that kind of goes back to the offseason and whether it was the right move to kind of push Zowie B to the side, bring in Liz, etc. That's a podcast for another day. My down.
Who's your down?
My down team is the other, team that is in this position of should they make the playoffs? Yes, they probably should have if we're looking at it a week ago. And now you look at it, and the Atlanta Dream have fallen kind of to a spot where I'd be more surprised if they did make it. They in a way were able to control their own destiny, and coming out of the Commissioner's Cup break just had, I don't want to say inexcusable, because again, the way this schedule is constructed, how difficult and competitive the league is, there's no inexcusable loss really. It's very rare. But this was as close as you could come to just one of those head scratching losses where it's like, wow, they really did not compete on their home floor against Minnesota in a game that frankly you just need to win if you're going to, stick in that 6, 7, 8 range and make the playoffs, which they were well positioned to do. They've really slid back, and then they lose again at home to Dallas. And there it is. It's two teams that you're competing with in this range from 6 to 11, and two games at home that frankly, it wasn't even that close near the end of it at the fourth quarter. And it's tough because it's a team I really root for. It's a team I really enjoy watching, but I think we're just seeing the inexperience and just kind of this team's true talent level come to the forefront, right? Which is like, this is a team extremely well situated for the future. They've got great potential, great promise. I talked about Naz Hillman recently on the podcast. Love the way she's playing. Ryan Howard is pretty undeniably the rookie of the year. But offensively, if Tiff Hayes isn't on, this team just does not have enough offense. They're the 11th offense in the league and just a sliver above Indiana in the cellar. I mean, when you're, at the bottom with the team that's lost 14 in a row, you can't really expect to make the playoffs. And look, this is what we expected at the start of the year. It's not a bad thing. They've really punched above their weight all season and had this really incredible, productive season after a lost season in 2021. But, for Dream fans, this past week was definitely disappointing because you have a playoff spot right there within your grasp, and now it seems to be slipping away.
Yeah, it's definitely slipping away, but you know what? End of the day, this is better for the Dream as an organization moving forward. Like we can all agree to that, and everything you've said has been true. They played a great first half of the season, and they've kind of regressed to the average, to what's expected. And honestly, like, that's perfect for this team. They're a down stock because, the questions of them making the playoffs, and that's where we're at in the season. But if you're talking like long-term stock, this is a team that you want to buy stock in right now, because from this point forward, like, this is the lowest it's going to be for many years, just based on who they have, based on the direction this organization and team is going. So you have to be positive about that. It's not like, for instance, to quote my dear friend Rachel Galligan, when she's talking about LA, she'll say something to the effect of, just blow it all up. Like, we're at that point, just blow it all up. You're not gonna have trouble getting superstars and big names to come there. Blow it all up, get a new coach, get a new roster. This is not the situation for Atlanta. You have your coach, you have your GM, you have some core pieces for the roster. Now it's this offseason is reconstruct it. And honestly, I'll say it now, Atlanta's a playoff team next year. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts. I also realized I forgot to give the link The link for our playback streams is getplayback.com/room/Winsidr. That's getplayback.com/room/Winsidr. We'll be doing a stream tomorrow for the Las Vegas Aces game in DC versus the Washington Mystics. Gus is going to be joining me for that one because my lovely wife will be at the game. So we'll get some insider trading from the ground floor of the stock exchange. Should we start referring to the courts or the home courts as the stock
Oh, I
exchange?
love it. Yeah, we really have a lot of untapped potential as far as the references go here. That's gold.
Hey, we got more time. It's not even, what I mean, the stocks never stop. We'll be back next week with WNBA Stocks, where myself, Aria Schwartz, and my number one partner, Owen Pence, break down where the market is in the WNBA as of when we record. And next week we'll probably have a more clear picture of the playoff chase, the playoff hunt, who's in, who's out, and kind of limiting who we can do for stocks. And Gus is signing off. Owen, anything you want to say?
Nothing I want to say. Excited for this home stretch, and can't wait to get back at it next week.